Welcome to Sleepless Folks, a place where we journey into the distant past so you can fall asleep gently, calmly, and with purpose. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. By the end of this story, you'll be fast asleep. Close your eyes. The story is about to begin. Tonight, we explore one of the most famous and at the same time one of the darkest myths of ancient Greece, the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. You may have heard this legend in childhood, told as a heroic tale of bravery and triumph. But tonight, it will be different. This time, we uncover the myth without censorship. We will delve into the hidden layers often left untold, the brutality behind the heroism, the forbidden desire that shaped fate, and the quiet tragedies woven beneath the surface of legend. This is not just a story of a monster in a labyrinth. It is a story of pride and punishment, passion and betrayal, courage and irreversible loss, a myth that reveals the dark side of human nature, reflected through the gods and heroes of ancient Greece. Let the world fade away, and allow this ancient tale to carry you gently into the night. King Minos and the sign of Poseidon on the beautiful island of Crete ruled a king named Minos, one of the most powerful and feared rulers of his age. He was a man of iron pride and ruthless ambition, driven by an unyielding desire to stand above all other mortals and, in his heart, even above the gods themselves. Minos demanded not only obedience, but all. He wanted to be admired, envied, and feared. His authority was something he felt compelled to prove again and again, as if power itself were never enough. Yet the throne of Crete was not his by birthright alone. When his adoptive father, King Asterion, died, the question of succession tore the royal family apart. Minos' brothers Sarpedon and Rhadamanthus each claimed they were the rightful heir. What followed was not a peaceful debate, but a bitter struggle, fueled by rivalry, ambition, and resentment. Determined to end the dispute once and for all, Minos chose a dangerous path. He decided to place his fate in the hands of the gods. Standing before the sea, he prayed to Poseidon, the mighty god of oceans, storms, and earthquakes. His vow was bold and fatal. "If I am truly destined to rule Crete," Minos declared, "let Poseidon send me a bull from the depths of the sea, and I swear I will sacrifice this creature to the god himself." Poseidon heard the prayer, and he answered it. Before the astonished eyes of the people of Crete, the waters of the sea began to churn and rise. From the foaming depths emerged a creature of breathtaking beauty, a magnificent bull, massive and powerful, its hide shining white as polished marble. Its horns gleamed like silver in the sunlight, and its eyes deep calm, and almost human, seemed to carry a divine awareness. The people fell silent. They knew at once that this was no ordinary animal. It was a sign clear, undeniable, sent by Poseidon himself. Minos' claim to the throne was confirmed before gods and men alike. But divine gifts are never without expectation, and the gods do not forget promises made to them. What Minos did next would set into motion a chain of events so dark, so unnatural, that its echoes would haunt Crete and all of Greek myth for generations to come. The oath broken, the pride of King Minos. But what followed was something no one had foreseen. When Minos stood upon the shore and saw the bull rise from the sea, he did not bow his head in gratitude. Foam still clung to the creature's hooves, and its hide shone with an unearthly whiteness, as if it carried the light of the deep itself. This was no ordinary animal. It moved with quiet majesty, powerful yet calm, a living sign of divine favor. And instead of reverence, something darker awakened within the king. Minos felt pride swell in his chest. Greed followed close behind. Before him stood a creature of such rare beauty that the thought of destroying it felt unbearable. To sacrifice this bull to stain its perfect form with blood suddenly seemed like an act of loss rather than devotion. The king told himself that such magnificence should not be wasted on an altar, and so Minos hesitated. In that hesitation, the balance shifted. Rather than honoring the vow he had sworn before the god, Minos ordered the divine bull to be led away and placed among his royal herds. He commanded that it be guarded, admired, preserved. In its place, he chose another animal ordinary, indistinct, easily replaced, and sent that lesser offering to the altar. He convinced himself that the gods would not notice, or if they did, that they would understand. After all, had he not ruled wisely? Had he not honored the gods before? Surely a single substitution would be forgiven. Surely a king's cleverness could soften divine law. But the gods cannot be deceived. Poseidon saw everything. From the depths of the sea, the god watched as Minos broke his oath, not out of fear, but out of arrogance. What stirred Poseidon's anger was not only the stolen sacrifice, but the belief behind it, the quiet certainty that a mortal ruler could bend sacred law to his own desire without consequence. The sea god did not roar. He did not send waves to crush the palace or storms to tear Crete apart. His anger was colder than that, older, more patient, for Poseidon understood that the most devastating punishments are not those that strike from the outside, but those that grow from within. And so his wrath took a subtler form, not lightning, not flood, but corruption, a punishment designed to turn desire into disgrace, to twist beauty into horror, to ensure that the consequences of pride would live, breathe, and walk the halls of Minos' own palace. The broken oath had already set the gears of fate in motion. Soon, the royal house of Minos would become the birthplace of something unnatural, something born not of love or reverence, but of betrayal and hubris. A living reminder that no promise sworn to the gods can be broken without cost. And when that nightmare finally emerged, it would echo through myth for centuries to come. The punishment of Pasiphaë and Daedalus' dark design. Poseidon chose a punishment that would be cruel, humiliating, and unforgettable, but also subtle enough to become a lesson for all who witnessed it. Instead of striking Minos down directly, the god turned his wrath toward the king's household. He called upon Aphrodite, the goddess of love and carnal desire, and asked her to curse Minos' wife, the proud and beautiful Queen Pasiphaë. With an unnatural and horrifying passion for the white bull, Aphrodite agreed without hesitation. She had always delighted in playing with the hearts and desires of mortals, especially when love crossed the line into obsession. From that moment on, Pasiphae's life became a living nightmare. She was no ordinary woman. She was the daughter of Helios, the god of the sun, and the nymph Perse, born of divine blood and raised with royal pride. And yet, the higher her origin, the more degrading her punishment became. Sleep abandoned her. Peace vanished. The image of the bull haunted her waking thoughts and invaded her dreams. What had once been awe slowly twisted into a burning, painful desire, one she could neither suppress nor escape. Pasiphaë understood the horror of what she was feeling. She knew it was forbidden, unnatural, and shameful. She fought against it with all her will, but the divine force driving her obsession was stronger than any mortal resistance. Day by day, the queen began to lose herself. She felt trapped inside her own body, imprisoned by a mind that no longer obeyed her. Shame, despair, and longing consumed her, until at last she reached a breaking point, one where reason no longer mattered. In her desperation, Pasiphaë turned to Daedalus, the greatest craftsman and inventor of his age, who lived at Minos' court. Only he possessed the skill to make the impossible real. Her request shocked even Daedalus. He immediately understood that whatever he created would lead to tragedy, that he was being drawn into a monstrous design. But refusal was not an option. To defy the queen was to invite death, not only for himself but for his young son. Icarus. Fear forced the master's hand. Daedalus built a life-sized wooden cow, hollow inside and crafted with such precision that it appeared real even up close. He covered it with the hide of a real animal and shaped every detail with terrifying realism enough to deceive the bull itself. Pasiphaë hid within the wooden creation, and in this way, through art twisted into madness, she fulfilled her unnatural and catastrophic desire. From this act, something monstrous would soon be born, something that would change the fate of Crete, Athens, and countless lives forever. The birth of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. The consequences of this act were monstrous. In time, Pasiphaë gave birth to a creature that horrified the palace of Naxos and the people of Crete alike. What came into the world was no child, but a living nightmare. Its body was human, strong and broad-shouldered, yet its head was that of a great bull crowned with massive horns, eyes burning with rage, and breath heavy with the heat of an untamed beast. This creature was named Asterion, but history would remember him by another name, the Minotaur, the Bull of Minos. That name became an eternal reminder of the king's broken oath, his arrogance, and the madness that had fallen upon his household. Minos understood at once what this creature truly was. It was not merely a monster, it was punishment. He could not bring himself to kill it. To do so would risk deepening the wrath of the gods. Yet he could not allow it to be seen. If the people of Crete learned the truth, they would turn against him. His power would collapse under the weight of shame and fear. So Minos chose secrecy. Once again, he summoned Daedalus, the greatest craftsman and mind of his age, and gave him a terrible command to build a place from which the Minotaur could never escape, and into which no one could venture and return with the truth. Thus, the Labyrinth was born, a vast, merciless structure of stone and shadow, filled with endless corridors, false paths, and dead ends. It was designed to confuse not only the body, but the mind itself. So intricate and deceptive was its design that even Daedalus, its creator, struggled to find his way out once construction was complete. The labyrinth rose near the palace of Naxos, the hidden wound beneath the splendor of royal power. Its passageways twisted back upon themselves, repeating, looping, trapping any soul that dared to enter. And there, in the heart of that stone prison, Minos locked away the Minotaur, sealing both the monster and the shame of his bloodline behind walls of darkness. But the labyrinth was not only a prison. It was a promise. Promise that this sin would not remain buried forever, and that one day, blood, courage, and betrayal would lead someone into its depths, and change the fate of gods and men alike. The death of Androgeus, and the blood tribute of Athens. While King Minos concealed his monstrous shame within the labyrinth of Crete, tragedy was unfolding beyond the island's shores. Androgeus, the beloved son of Minos, traveled to Athens to compete in athletic games and prove his strength and excellence among the Greeks. Young, powerful, and gifted, he surpassed all rivals and emerged victorious in every contest. But his success bred envy. Soon after, Androgeus met a sudden and mysterious death. Some claimed he was murdered by jealous Athenians, unable to endure his triumph. Others whispered a darker version that King Aegeus of Athens deliberately sent the young prince on a perilous hunt, where he was slain by a savage bull. When news of his son's death reached Crete, Minos was consumed by grief and rage. He responded with merciless force, demanding the greatest naval power of his age. Minos laid siege to Athens by land and sea. War followed, bloody, relentless, and unforgiving. Despite their resistance, the Athenians could not withstand the might of Crete. Eventually, the city stood on the brink of total destruction. Desperate and broken, Athens sued for peace on any terms Minos demanded. The price he imposed was cruel and humiliating. Every 9 years, Athens would send a living tribute to Crete, 7 young men and 7 young women. Chosen by lot from the noble families of the city, these youths were condemned to enter the labyrinth, where they would be devoured by the Minotaur, the monstrous embodiment of Minos' curse and shame. It was not an execution, but a slow erasure into darkness. This blood tribute had already been paid twice. Now, Athens faced the third sending without hope, without rescue, without mercy. Each selection plunged the city into mourning. Parents wept in silence. Streets filled with despair. The future itself seemed devoured long before the victims ever reached the labyrinth. Athens lived under the shadow of inevitable sacrifice. And it was in this moment when the city believed itself utterly doomed that fate prepared the arrival of a man who would dare to challenge the monster, the king, and the gods themselves. The birth of a hero, Theseus. It was at this darkest hour, when Athens seemed trapped in an endless cycle of fear and sacrifice, that a figure emerged who would change the course of fate itself. His name was Theseus. Many years earlier, King Aegeus of Athens had sought answers from the oracle of Delphi, tormented by one question: why had he been denied an heir? The oracle's response was cryptic and veiled in symbolism, offering no clear guidance. Troubled and uncertain, Aegeus traveled to the city of Troezen to seek counsel from its wise king, Theseus. Renowned for his deep understanding of prophecy, Theseus grasped the hidden meaning of the oracle's words and acted. He arranged for Aegeus to spend the night with his daughter, Aethra, hoping to bind their bloodlines and secure a future for Athens. At dawn, Aegeus departed, unaware of what the night would ultimately bring. Before leaving, however, he placed his sword and sandals beneath a massive stone and gave Aethra a solemn instruction: if a son is born, and if he grows strong enough to lift this stone, let him take these tokens and come to Athens. By them, I will know him as my son and rightful heir. But destiny was not finished weaving its design. That same night, the sea god Poseidon visited Aethra. Because of this divine encounter, Theseus would grow up believing himself the son of two fathers, a mortal king and a god of the sea. This dual heritage, human and divine, set him apart from the very beginning, marking him as someone destined for greatness, but also for hardship. Theseus grew into a youth of remarkable strength, relentless determination, and fierce courage. His childhood was shaped by discipline and trials, as if the world itself were preparing him for what lay ahead. When the day finally came and Aethra revealed the truth of his birth, Theseus did not hesitate. With ease, he lifted the massive stone, reclaimed his father's sword and sandals, and accepted his fate. Without hesitation, he set out for Athens, walking straight into danger, toward a destiny that would test not only his strength, but his character, his mercy, and his capacity for sacrifice. The hero had been born, and the shadows that haunted Greece would soon learn his name. The road to Athens. Theseus' first labors. The road from Troezen to Athens was feared by travelers. It was not a simple path between cities, but a deadly stretch of land ruled by bandits, monsters, and men who delighted in cruelty. Few dared to walk it alone. Theseus chose it deliberately. He believed that a true hero should not avoid danger, but cleanse the world of it. The first threat he encountered was Pasiphaë, a brutal bandit who attacked travelers with a massive bronze club. Theseus faced him in combat, defeated him, and claimed the club as a trophy, the symbol of his first victory and the beginning of his legend. Further along the road, he met Cinis, known as the Pine Bender. Cinis tortured his victims by tying them to bent pine trees and tearing their bodies apart when the trees were released. Theseus defeated him using the same method, delivering justice in the very form of Cinis' own cruelty. Next came the Cromulonian sow, a monstrous and savage beast that terrorized the countryside. Theseus hunted it down and killed it, freeing the land from fear. At the cliffs overlooking the sea, Theseus confronted Siren, who forced travelers to wash his feet before kicking them off the cliff to be devoured by a monstrous sea creature below. Theseus ended his reign of terror by throwing Siren from the same precipice. He then faced Circean, a ruthless fighter who challenged travelers to wrestling matches, killing those he defeated through brute force and treachery. Theseus overcame him not with raw strength alone, but with skill and intelligence. Finally, there was Procrus, perhaps the most cruel of all. Procrus offered weary travelers a bed for the night, but if their bodies did not fit its length, he would stretch them or cut them down to size. Theseus punished him by forcing Procrus onto his own bed, subjecting him to the same fate he had inflicted on countless victims. One by one, Theseus destroyed the evils that haunted the road. By the time he reached Athens, he was already a hero, not by birthright alone, but by the justice he carried with him. The path was finally safe, and his name had begun to echo across Greece. The road to Athens had been cleansed, and destiny was waiting. The recognized sun, and the choice that changed fate. When Theseus finally reached Athens, King Aegeus did not recognize him at once. Time had passed, and the marks of destiny are often subtle until the moment they reveal themselves. At the king's side lived Medea, a powerful sorceress, sharp of mind and dark of foresight. The instant she laid eyes on the young man, she knew who he was. And she knew something more dangerous still. This stranger was a threat to her influence, to her plans, and above all, to her own son. Medea whispered poison into the king's ear before ever touching the cup. She warned Aegeus that the newcomer was dangerous, an enemy in disguise, a man whose presence could bring ruin to Athens. Then she prepared a chalice laced with death and urged the king to offer it as a gesture of hospitality. Theseus took his place at the table, and as he did, Aegeus saw it. At the young man's side hung a sword, old, familiar, unmistakable. The blade he himself had once hidden beneath a stone. The blade meant for his son. In a heartbeat, truth broke through deception. Aegeus struck the cup from Theseus' hands, shattering it against the floor before the poison could be drunk. In that instant, the king knew the youth before him was not an enemy, but his own flesh and blood. Medea's plot was exposed. With no place left for her in Athens, she fled the city, vanishing as suddenly as she had appeared. Father and son embraced at last after years of separation, danger, and unknowing. Yet their reunion was shadowed by a terrible truth. The time had come again for the tribute to Crete. 7 young men and 7 young women, chosen to be sent into the labyrinth to be devoured by the Minotaur. Theseus saw their faces. He saw their fear. He saw the quiet resignation of those already condemned. And then he made his choice. He would go with them, not as a victim, but as a challenger, not to survive, but to end the curse forever. Theseus vowed to enter the labyrinth, to face the monster, and to destroy it, so that Athens would never again be forced to pay in blood for an ancient debt. Aegeus begged his son to reconsider. He pleaded not as a king, but as a father who had only just found his child. But Theseus would not be moved. His path was set. At last, the king asked for one thing, one fragile promise. If you return victorious, Aegeus said, replace the black sail of mourning with a white one. Let me know from afar that you live. Theseus swore the oath, and then he departed toward the labyrinth, toward the monster, toward a fate that would echo far beyond his own life. Ariadne, and the thread of salvation. When the ship finally reached the shores of Crete, the Athenians were not welcomed as travelers. nor even as prisoners of war. They were received with cold, ritualized disdain. To the people of Crete, they were not human beings, but offerings, living tributes destined for the darkness of the labyrinth. Guards surrounded them at once, herding them through the massive gates and along stone corridors worn smooth by centuries of power and obedience. They were led into the palace of King Minos, a place of towering columns and echoing halls, where wealth and cruelty coexisted in quiet harmony. There, Minos looked upon the condemned without curiosity and without doubt. To him, this was a familiar ceremony, repeated many times before. He did not suspect that among these fearful faces stood the one who would dare to challenge his deepest secret, the monster hidden beneath his kingdom, and the shame bound to his throne. It was within these halls that Theseus first encountered Ariadne, the daughter of Minos. When her eyes fell upon him, something within her shifted, as if a thread long dormant had suddenly been pulled. Theseus did not look like the others. Fear bent their shoulders and hollowed their gazes, but he stood upright, silent, and composed. There was a stillness about him, a quiet strength that did not seek attention, yet commanded it. His eyes held neither panic nor resignation, but a steady resolve that unsettled her. Ariadne felt her heart respond before her mind could intervene. At first, it was simple curiosity. Then came admiration, a sense of recognition she could not explain. And finally, a deep and dangerous passion took hold, one that pierced through loyalty, fear, and reason alike. In Theseus, she saw not only a man, but the possibility of an ending, or perhaps of a beginning. That night, while the palace lay wrapped in silence and torchlight flickered along empty corridors, Ariadne made her choice. She came to Theseus in secret, her steps cautious but determined. There was no pretense in her voice, no games or disguises. She confessed her love openly, knowing full well the risk she was taking. And she begged him not only to let her help him escape, but to take her with him when he fled Crete, to leave behind her father, her palace, and the destiny that had been imposed upon her since birth. In return, she offered him the only thing that could grant survival, the knowledge of the labyrinth. Theseus listened in silence, understanding the weight of what she placed before him, and then he swore an oath. If he lived, if he emerged from the darkness, he would take Ariadne away from Crete, bring her to Athens, and make her his wife. His promise was spoken with conviction, yet neither of them could know how heavily it would one day echo. Before dawn, Ariadne returned to him once more. In her hands she carried something simple, almost insignificant in appearance, yet more powerful than any blade, a ball of thread. She also gave him a sword, knowing that strength alone would not be enough without guidance. Then she revealed the true nature of the labyrinth. Its corridors twisted endlessly, turning back upon themselves, designed not merely to confuse the body, but to erase the mind. No one who entered could remember the way out. Panic, darkness, and exhaustion ensured that escape was impossible even for the brave, but the thread would change that fate. One end was to be tied at the entrance. The rest was to be unwound as he walked forward, marking each step, each choice, each turn. And when the monster fell, if it fell, the thread would lead him back through the darkness, returning him to life and light. Thus was born the thread of Ariadne, not merely a tool, but a promise, a fragile line stretched between life and death, a symbol of memory in a place designed to erase it, of love offered freely in the face of terror, and of the quiet wisdom that reminds us that courage alone is never enough. One must also remember the way home. The labyrinth, and the battle with the Minotaur, with a sword hidden beneath his garments and the ball of thread clenched in his hand. Theseus approached the entrance to the labyrinth. Weapons were forbidden to the captives, and the hero concealed the blade from the guards, knowing that discovery would mean death before the trial even began. The stone walls of the labyrinth were dark and wet, covered with dampness and mold. A heavy stench of rot and decay filled the air, as though the place itself were alive and breathing corruption. All the prisoners were driven inside at once. The gates closed behind them. They were left not as people, but as prey. At the threshold, Theseus tied the end of Ariadne's thread to the stone. He ordered the others to remain where they were, not to move, not to follow, not to panic. Then he stepped forward alone. Darkness swallowed him almost immediately. It was thick, nearly tangible, pressing against his skin. With every step deeper into the maze, the atmosphere grew heavier, more ominous. From far within the winding passages came a low, guttural growl and the slow, thunderous sound of something enormous moving through the shadows. At last, Theseus reached the center. A wide chamber opened before him, faintly illuminated by thin beams of pale light slipping through narrow cracks high above. And there, waiting in the half-light, stood the Minotaur. It was a monstrous fusion of beast and man, the massive head of a bull crowned with powerful horns, set upon a towering human body covered in dark horsehair. Its eyes burned with fury and hunger. When it roared, the sound crashed against the walls and returned multiplied, shaking the chamber like a living echo. The Minotaur charged. Theseus barely leapt aside in time as the creature rushed past, its weight cracking stone beneath its hooves. The battle that followed was brutal, a savage struggle balanced on the edge between life and death. At first, the hero's sword only wounded the beast, slicing flesh but inflaming its rage. Each strike made the monster more ferocious, more relentless. Then came the decisive moment. As the Minotaur lunged again, Theseus turned aside at the last instant and drove the sword forward with all his strength. The blade sank deep into the monster's chest. The roar broke into a final, shuddering cry, and the Minotaur collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Silence followed. Around the fallen body lay the bones of countless victims, those who had entered the labyrinth before and never returned. In that moment, Theseus understood fully what horror he had ended, and what fate he had lifted from his people. He turned back, following Ariadne's thread. Step by step, Theseus retraced his path through the darkness. He returned to the captives, cut through their terror with a single command, and led them out of the labyrinth, out of death, and back into the light. Escape and betrayal. On Naxos, at the exit of the labyrinth, Ariadne was waiting. She stood motionless in the half-light, hardly breathing, suspended between hope and terror. Every sound made her heart tighten. Every shadow seemed to move. The darkness behind the stone doorway felt endless, as though it might never release what it had swallowed. She had given Theseus everything: her trust, her knowledge, her future, and now she could do nothing but wait. Then she saw him, from the depths of the labyrinth. A figure emerged slowly at first, then more clearly. Theseus stepped into the light, alive. In that instant, all restraint left her. Ariadne ran to him without a word, as if speech itself were too fragile for such relief. Theseus caught her in his arms, and in that embrace he finally understood the full weight of what she had done. It was not only his strength that had defeated the monster, but her courage, her loyalty, and the terrible risk she had taken against her own blood. But there was no time to remain in that moment. Victory was still fragile, and danger had not yet passed. The truth would soon reach Minos. When it did, his vengeance would be immediate and merciless. The palace would erupt in fury, the guards would flood the shore, and no corner of Crete would offer refuge. Under the cover of night, they fled. In silence, the survivors moved toward the ship, their footsteps muffled by sand and fear. Torches burned faintly in the distance, but no alarm had yet been raised. The oars entered the water without a sound, and the vessel drifted away from the shore, leaving behind the island of blood and stone. Soon, Crete dissolved into darkness, swallowed by the black waters of the sea. For a time, there was only wind and movement. The nightmare lay behind them, The horizon ahead seemed open, forgiving, almost kind. On their journey toward Athens, the ship stopped at the island of Naxos to replenish water and gather food. The shore was quiet and touched, bathed in the pale stillness of dawn. It was meant to be a brief pause, a moment of rest before home. Instead, it became a breaking point. What happened next was never fully agreed upon. Some said it was the will of the gods, who intervened in the fate of mortals as they always had. Others believed it was Theseus himself, that the fire in his heart had dimmed, that the bond forged in danger could not survive daylight and distance. To some, Ariadne became a reminder of fear and dependency. No longer a savior but a weight he wished to leave behind. The truth remained suspended between myth and shadow, while Ariadne slept on the sand. Wrapped in trust and exhaustion, Theseus made his decision. Without waking her, without farewell or explanation, he ordered the sails to be raised. The ship responded to the wind at once, slipping away from the island in the quiet hours before sunrise. When Ariadne awoke, the world had changed. At first, she did not understand the silence. Then she saw the empty shoreline. Panic surged through her as she ran along the water's edge, calling his name, scanning the horizon again and again. And then she saw the ship, already distant, its black sails cutting through the pale light of dawn, moving steadily away. There was no answer. Ariadne collapsed onto the sand, the strength leaving her all at once. The daughter of a great king, once a princess of Crete, now lay abandoned on a deserted island, betrayed by the hero she had saved, left behind with nothing but the echo of a promise that would never be kept. And in that moment, her story did not end. It began again, shaped not by rescue, but by loss. Dionysus and Ariadne's crown of stars, but fate had not finished with Ariadne. Left alone on the silent shores of Naxos, she wept beneath an indifferent sky. The sea that had carried Theseus away now answered her cries with nothing but the rhythm of its waves. Night after night, she remained suspended between what had been promised and what had been taken from her, between love given freely and love abandoned without farewell. And then the world shifted. From the quiet depths of the island came Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and sacred transformation. He did not arrive as a conqueror, nor as a savior drawn by pity. He came as one who recognizes what others fail to see. When Dionysus looked upon Ariadne, he did not see a woman discarded. He saw a soul that had passed through devotion, courage, and loss and had survived. He fell in love with her at first sight, not despite her sorrow, but because of it. Dionysus approached her gently and spoke not of escape, but of becoming. He did not ask her to forget what had been done to her, nor did he promise to erase the pain. Instead, he honored it. He told her that what she had endured had shaped her into something rare, someone capable of standing between worlds, mortal and divine, suffering and joy, abandonment and rebirth. He offered her a choice: to remain bound to the story that had wounded her or to step beyond it. Dionysus asked Ariadne to become his wife. And more than that, he offered her immortality, not as a reward, but as recognition. He would raise her beyond the fragile limits of human fate, beyond betrayal and loss, and make her a goddess among gods. Ariadne accepted. In that acceptance, something within her changed forever. The girl who had tied a thread for another man to survive his descent now became the woman whose own path led upward to the stars themselves. As a symbol of their union, Dionysus gave her a crown of pure gold, radiant with divine craftsmanship. It was not merely an ornament, but a mark of transformation. And when the time came, Dionysus lifted the crown from her hands and cast it into the heavens. There, it burst into light, and became a constellation set among the stars, so that her name would never be lost to time. Thus Ariadne's fate was rewritten. Once abandoned on a deserted shore, she became eternal. Once left behind by a hero, She was chosen by a god. Her suffering did not diminish her worth, it revealed it. And her crown of stars still shines above the world, reminding those who look up that betrayal is not always an ending. Sometimes, it is the threshold. Astros, the black sails, and the death of Aegeus. Meanwhile, Theseus continued his journey toward Athens, carrying victory upon his shoulders and tragedy unknowingly in his wake. Behind him lay the Labyrinth, the fallen monster, and a curse broken forever. Ahead of him stood home and a father who waited. King Aegeus watched the horizon every day, from the cliffs above the sea. He searched the distant line where water meets sky, his eyes strained by hope and fear in equal measure. He had lost his wife long ago. He had found his son only to send him toward death. Now, all that remained was waiting, an unbearable vigil suspended between salvation and despair. At last, a ship appeared. Its dark shape emerged from the mist, slowly approaching the shores of Athens. Aegeus' heart began to race as he fixed his gaze upon the mast, desperate to see the sign he had begged for, the white sail that would mean his son had lived. But the sail was black. Theseus, worn by exhaustion, overwhelmed by triumph and the euphoria of survival, had forgotten the promise. The black sail of mourning still caught the wind, dark against the pale sky, carrying a meaning he never intended to send. From the cliff, Aegeus saw only what he feared most. To him, the black sail could mean only one thing: Theseus was dead. His son, his heir, the last hope of his line, had been lost to the sea and the monster. The weight of that belief crushed him completely. There was no strength left to endure it, no future left to imagine. Overcome by grief, the king stepped forward and threw himself from the cliff into the waves below. His body vanished into the sea. Thus Aegeus died, not by enemy hands, not by war or betrayal, but by love and unbearable loss. And from that day on, the waters that swallowed him bore his name. The sea became the Aegean, forever bound to the sorrow of a father who waited too long for hope that never arrived, only later would. Theseus learned the cost of his forgetting, that even a victorious hero can carry destruction without knowing it, and that fate often claims its final price not in battle, but in silence. Asterisk. The price of victory and the final reckoning. When Theseus set foot on the shores of Athens, the triumph he carried within him shattered at once. Waiting for him was not celebration, but the terrible news of his father's death. In that moment, the truth became clear. He understood what his forgetfulness had cost, and how irreversible his mistake had been. The victory he had been so proud of turned bitter in his hands. He had slain the monster. He had freed his people from terror. Yet the price of that triumph was the life of the man who had waited for him every day, watching the horizon with hope that never came. From that day forward, Theseus would carry the knowledge that even the greatest achievements can be shadowed by loss, and that success does not always arrive without consequence. Still, life moved forward. Theseus accepted the crown and became ruler of Athens. He reformed the city, united the scattered settlements of Attica, and laid the foundations of a political order that would one day grow into what we now call Athenian democracy. His name entered history not only as a hero, but as a builder of a state. And yet, no honor could erase the memory of the black sail. Throughout his life, Theseus was followed by the echo of that single moment, the forgotten promise, the silent misunderstanding, the fall from the cliff. It changed the taste of victory forever. From then on, triumph and grief were inseparable in his story, woven together like light and shadow. And this is why the myth does not end with the slaying of a monster. The ancient Greeks told these stories to remind one another that heroism is not perfection, and that even the greatest figures are shaped as much by their failures as by their deeds. A single choice, a single forgotten detail, can alter the course of many lives and echo across generations. Thank you for taking this journey with me into the world of ancient myths. If this story moved you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next tale. Until we meet again, beneath the same stars that still carry the memory of gods, heroes, and the price they paid for victory.